Okay, guys. So we just finished Unit 3 yesterday, and everybody did amazing on the quiz. I mean, seriously, everyone did wonderful. So I'm really proud of you guys. And if you haven't taken it yet, no big deal. We got until tomorrow, so we'll do that. But we are going to start Unit 4 today. This is our last unit of pre-algebra. One more week and you guys are moving on in the world. So let's look at what I gave you this morning. So I'm going to just run through these notes that I had you guys read in the last couple of minutes here. What is this called, you guys?
A graph.
A graph, exactly. So whenever we have a graph, we can use it to plot specific points and tell their location of those points. And there's two axes, I guess that's the plural, two axes on a graph. We've got the x-axis, that one goes left to right. We've got the y-axis, that one goes up and down. Now, when I was in high school and I was learning the difference between my x and y axis, I usually had a lot of trouble figuring out which one was which. So here's a little thing to help you remember. When you're looking at your y axis, the one that goes up and down, I remember that if I were to draw the letter y, it connects with the line like this. So y goes up and down because we've got a line that goes up and down at the bottom of our y. That was my trick for remembering. And then I just remember that the x, you could even look at it like this. I can use the end of my arrow on my x-axis and create an x right here. So there's my x-axis, there's my y-axis. I guess you could also draw this down here and make another y. There's a y, there's an x. So x and y axis, they never change. X is always left to right, y is always up and down. We can't mix those up. So let's look at the next thing that we looked at on our notes here. Can somebody tell me, after reading this little part here, what are these called, these sets of numbers? Coordinates. Good. So a coordinate is paired nicely with our graph here. These little sets of numbers just tell us where something is. It gives us a location. Kind of like longitude and latitude. You know, it tells us where something is in the world. Coordinates tell us where something is on a graph. So with coordinates, the first number is always the x value. It's going to tell us where our point lines up with the x-axis. The second number is always the y value. It's going to tell us where the point lines up with the y-axis. So those are just a few examples. Let's flip to the next page, and here's where we get to see it happen, kind of in action. So here you're going to see a few coordinates on a graph. I put this coordinate here. We call this one 2, 3. Which number is the x value in this coordinate?
3 y.
Which one's the x?
2.
2. So if you look at your graph, I drew a little dotted line to show you this point right here lines up with 2 on the x-axis because there's a 2 in the first slot of the coordinate. The first numbers are x, so it lines up with 2. Next we've got our y value. What's the y value? 3, exactly. So if 3 is our y value, that means our point has to line up with 3 on the y-axis. Again, it's just telling us a location. So, just like on a number line, we have positive numbers and we have negative numbers. So where the x and the y-axis intersect, right here in the middle, this is our 0. Whenever we go to either side of 0, when we go to the right, we'll count positive x's. Whenever we go to the left, we count negative x's. Our y-axis is different. It's up for positive and then down for negative. So now we're looking at a coordinate that has negative values in it. So my second coordinate I gave you was -3, -4. Which number is the x value?
4. Oh, no, 3.
Yes, our x value is -3 because it comes first. Yes, so that means that our coordinate right here lines up with -3 on this x-axis. And then what's our y value? -4. So our coordinate will also line up with -4 on the y-axis. Not too difficult. It's just remembering which number goes where. So we always, anytime that I'm graphing coordinates or anything like that, I always start by labeling my x and y. And we'll get into a really good habit of that the more we work with these. So now here's where you guys did some work. I wanted you to match the points on the graph to the correct coordinates. So let's go through these and make sure that we know which one goes with which coordinate. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all these coordinates and I'm going to label my x's and my y's. I would do that first thing. So if you guys want to do that along with me, you're welcome to. If that's not something that you feel like helps you, do what you think helps. But I'm going to see that my first number is my x. So I'm going to go through and label x over all the first numbers. Just like that. Every number in the first slot of a coordinate is the x value. Now when it comes to graphing and coordinates, I'm going to tell you I have kind of a color theme. I always use red for x and blue for y. So if you want to use colored pens or markers or highlighters, there's a whole bunch of blue pens over there, a whole bunch of black ones, a whole bunch of red ones, and a ton of markers in every color. So you guys are welcome to use those. So now that we've got our x's labeled, we need to label our y's, which is the second value. So I'm going to go through and just write a little y over every one of my second values of the coordinates here. Okay. So let's look at point A on our graph first. Where is point A? I see it right here. So let's figure out first, where does A line up on the x-axis?
With that positive 2?
Yes, with +2. I can see right here it lines up with +2. So I'm going to put a 2 for my x. And where does it line up on the y-axis? +4. Good, right there. So I know that this coordinate is going to be named 2, 4. So let's find that one. Not -2, -4, 2, 4. There it is. So I'm going to draw a line from A to 2, 4. The second coordinate there. Did everybody get that first one right?
Yeah.
Good.
Well, I named them. I did it like a puzzle.
Oh, you did?
I got them, but I didn't go over and do this.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Hey, if you label them, that's even better. That's even better. That is even better, guys. No big deal. Okay, now let's look at point B. Where does B line up on the x-axis?
5.
Yep, +5. Good. And where does it line up on the y? +2. Good. So 5, 2. Let's find that one. It's the last coordinate right down here, 5, 2. So we'll draw a line from B down to 5, 2. Just like that. Yeah, you guys. I probably should have explained it better on the directions.
I gotta read it, you know.
Oh, it's all right. Okay, let's look at point C. Point C is right here. Where, yes, perfect, Lisa. It lines up with positive 2 on the x-axis because we're going over 1, 2. So, positive 2. And where does it line up on the y-axis? Negative 2. Good. So, we can put negative 2 in the y spot. And where do we see positive 2, negative 2 over here? Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Second to last one. So C lines up with 2, negative 2. So let's draw a line there, just like that. All right, now let's look at point D. First, where is D on the x-axis? Good, negative 2, right there. So our first value is negative 2 for x. And where does it line up with y? Negative 4. You guys got it. So our coordinate is negative 2, negative 4. So I'll find that one. It's right here. The top coordinate is negative 2, negative 4. So I'll draw a line from D up to negative 2, negative 4. Just like that. All right. Now let's check out E. Yep, E lines up with negative 3 on the x-axis. Perfect. Perfect. And positive 2. Did you guys get that one?
Well, I had the puzzle done right, I just didn't do it over here.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm not so worried about if you drew these lines.
I didn't read, I didn't look.
That's all right. I'm more worried about, were you able to get the correct numbers? Were you able to get the correct numbers?
I did on some of them.
Some of them. All right. So which ones did you guys struggle with?
Well, I thought it was a little bit different, but I just stopped at like D and E.
On D and E? Yeah, so D and E, when you start going into the negative values, I think it can get a little bit tricky. A little bit tricky. Sometimes it's easy to get mixed up on which axis we're looking at. But now that we've gone through and done it together, does it make sense how we got those numbers? Perfect. Good, 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 good. Okay, guys, any questions about this before we move on? Nope, you guys are good?
A whole lot better now.
Good. Okay, let's go ahead to the next page. You're going to go to the page that looks like this, page 3. Lines on a graph. Okay, so now we know how to put coordinates on a graph, but coordinates, they can be useful for some things, but what we really like to use them for, especially in this unit, is drawing lines. So a line can tell us a whole lot of things, and we'll learn about that here in a bit. But for example, this is a graph of the line that goes through these coordinates. It goes through negative 1, 1, and 3, 3. You guys see how we got the numbers for these coordinates? So remember, which value comes first, x or y? X, good. So I'm going to label my x's on both of my coordinates. And then what comes next? The y value, good. Good, good, good. So we can see with our first point, let's look at negative 1, 1. In the x direction, if I start from 0 at the middle of my graph and I go over 1 to the left, that would put me at x is negative 1. And you can see my point lines up perfectly with negative 1. All right, and then we also see that on the y-axis, we count up 1, so that's positive 1. So that's where we got those numbers. And then same thing with our coordinate 3, 3. Whenever we go over to the right, we count from the middle, 1, 2, 3. So we're at positive 3. That's where it lines up on the x-axis, positive 3. And same for the y. We start at the middle and we count up, 1, 2, 3, and it lines right up with that there, guys. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So my question to you all is, now that we drew a line that goes through those 2 points, where does the line touch the y-axis?
What line? Between the two of them?
This line right here. So here, let's maybe label. I've got 1, 2, 3. Where's the line touching the y-axis?
Between the 1 and 2.
Yeah, right in between the 1 and the 2.
That's what I put down.
Perfect. So we would say right here, the line touches the y-axis at, I'm going to make a coordinate. Our y value is going to be about 1.5, 1.5. So I'm going to put 1.5 in the y spot. And where are we on the x-axis?
On the -3.
Yeah, I've got -1, -2, -3. So my line touches about -3 on the x-axis. So if I were to make another coordinate, I'm going to go ahead and put -3 in my x spot. Now let's talk about what the x value would be for this point that we made and what the y value would be for this second point we made. So the line is touching the y-axis at 1.5. Where does this point that we created line up with the x-axis? What number would this be for x? 0. Good, 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 good. So we can put 0 in the x spot. Our x value is 0. How about for the next point we made, whenever x is -3, what's our y value? How far up or down do we go on this point? Nowhere. It lines up with right here on the y-axis. So also 0. Good. Yeah. Also 0. Also 0. So let's go ahead, and I labeled it over here, but I'm going to write it next to this. So where does the line touch the y-axis? We found out that it touches it at 0, 1.5, and where the line touches the x-axis, what coordinate did we find for that? Yes, -3, 0. Good. Good. So what we would call these points, I'm going to give you a new word. Anywhere that the line you draw touches the y-axis, we call that a y-intercept. Y-intercept. And whenever we find out where the line is touching the y-axis, just like we saw here, our x value will always be 0. And we'll talk more about that later. I don't want you to just memorize it. We'll make sure we understand why that is. Now, our point that we found, -3, 0, where our line touches the x-axis, Similar name, we call that the x-intercept. So anywhere that our line is touching the axis, whether it be the y-axis or the x-axis, we call those intercepts. Just where they're crossing the axis. Okay. So let's go ahead and move down the page. Let's name these coordinates, figure out what their x value and y value is. Then we're going to draw the line. And then we're going to figure out what their intercepts are. So, let's look at our point on the top half of our graph right here. What would our x value be? Let's count together. We've got 1, 2,
Oh, I counted the wrong one.
3.
Yeah, I counted the wrong
You're okay, you're okay. So our x-axis, I'll just label this 1, 2, 3. 3 is our x value. And what's our y value?
Positive.
1, 2, 3, 4. Lines up with positive 4 right there. So I'm going to put a 4 in my y spot. So there's one coordinate named. Let's name the lower coordinate, the lower point. What's our x value? -3. Good. So -1, -2, -3 is where it lines up right there. So I'll put -3 in my x spot. And where is it on the y-axis? -2. So I've got -1, -2. Perfect. So I've got these 2 points labeled as 3, 4, and -3, -2. Now, do all of you have a ruler at your table? If you don't, there should be some either sitting on tables, or I've got a whole bin of them up here at the front of the room. This is where we have to be very precise in math. When we are graphing lines, it can't be wiggly. It can't show something that it's not supposed to show. We're going to practice drawing this line here. So what you need to do is find those points and line them up nicely with your ruler so that it's as exact as you can make it. I do not want it to be like this, like this. I want it to be super precise. So, just like that. And then you're gonna trace that line. That way we can get the most accurate x and y intercepts. Because if you don't draw your line accurately, it's not gonna touch the axes on the accurate spot. Okay, everybody got their lines drawn? Good, good. Okay, so now that we have our line, I'm going to have you guys right below here, x, instead of writing intercept, I abbreviate it by just int, x-intercept and y-intercept. And let's figure out what those points are going to be. And I would go ahead and make parentheses to put your x and y values in so we can write coordinates for them. So let's look at our x-intercept first. The x-intercept is where the line touches the x-axis. So I would take your pencil, marker, pen, finger, whatever, and I would trace it along left to right on the x-axis. And I want you to write a little point where that line crosses the x-axis. Where are you going to draw your point? Right at -1. Good. So for our x-intercept, what's our x value going to be? -1. Good. Right where it touches. -1 is the first number you'll write. Okay. Oops, I wrote x-intercept twice, didn't I? I didn't even realize it. My bad.
I'm pretty sure she made a mistake.
I did. I sure did. Here, let me just,
To the next class and see the y, x.
there you go. There's a y. All right. Okay, so we found the x value of our x-intercept. Let's keep working with the x-intercept. Now that we have our point, we know that the x value is -1. What's our y value for this point? How far up or down does it go? This point goes up +4? It goes down to -4? Where is this red point right here? Where is it touching the y-axis? Where does it line up with the y-axis? Remember, this is where it goes up and down.
+1.
Just this point, not the line. We're looking at this red point right here, the x-intercept. I'm going to show you guys. So look.
Oh,
It's a 0.
0. I know it's tricky. It's tricky. Learning to read a graph whenever it's something you've either never seen or haven't seen in a long time, it's like learning a new language. It really is. So when I look at this little point right here that my pen is on, and I go straight over to see where it lines up with on the y-axis, I see that it touches 0. 0. Your x-intercept will always have a y that is 0. Your y value will always be 0. Okay, let's look at our y-intercept. Let's look at where our line touches the y-axis. So same thing we did before. I'm going to have you trace up and down and see where your line touches the y-axis. Where is it touching? +1. Good. So this is our y value since it's touching the y-axis going up and down. So for our coordinate, am I going to write 1 in the first spot or the second spot? Second. Good. The second spot is my y values. So our y value is 1. Perfect. Now, here's the tricky part. Where does this point we found line up on the x-axis? 0. When we're finding intercepts, once we've got our number for either the x value or the y value, the other one is always 0. It's always 0. Okay. Let's do this next one now. We're going to do a bunch of these, and I think this is one of those topics that you just got to keep doing it over and over, and it eventually does click. It's like, okay, I see now. It doesn't make a lot of sense until you do it a bunch. So, I've got 2 points, and I want to name them as coordinates. You want to do the one on top first or the one on bottom first? Yeah, let's do the top one. So I'm going to draw some parentheses. Which value comes first, x or y? X. So I'm looking at my point. Where does this point line up on the x-axis? -2. Good. -1, -2. So I'm going to write -2 in the first spot of my coordinate for the x value. Where does that point line up on the y-axis? This point right here. Yeah, here, I'll draw the line. You can see that it goes through right here on the y-axis. So I would count 1, 2, 3, 4. So what's my y value? 4. Positive 4. Very good. Very, very good. So that first point we found is -2, +4. I'll keep drawing these little dotted lines. Does that help to kind of see where it's touching a little more? If drawing a little line helps, do it. Okay, now let's look at our lower point. Which value comes first in a coordinate, x or y? X. Good. So, where does my point line up on the x-axis? +1. Good. So I'm going to write 1 in my x spot. And where does it line up on the y-axis? So here's our point.
-4, or positive, -4.
So here's our point, and here's our y-axis. If we start at 0 and count, yeah, we're going to count down to our point. -1, -2, -3, -4, right here. You guys see that? Okay, so we're going to put -4 in our y spot. Now let's practice drawing that line.
What's that?
So I want you to line up your ruler as closely and as precise as you can get it on those points. You know, take your time with it, be slow, make sure it lines up real nice. And we're going to trace that line. Okay, awesome. You guys' lines look about like mine? All right. So this is going to be a little bit of a trickier x and y intercept because they're a little close to the middle. Sometimes I think that throws us off. I want you to label x intercept and y intercept. And we're going to draw some parentheses to put our x and y values in. Okay, so where is this line touching the x-axis? Remember, we're going to start left to right, trace our finger along the x-axis, and where does it touch?
Like close to -1.
Yeah, right about here. So here's 0 right in the middle. We're going over to the left, not all the way to -1. We'll just make a guess. What about -1/2-ish? Maybe -1/3? Something about like that. So let's draw a little point there. So for our x value of our x-intercept, we could put negative, I'm going to put 1/2. -1/2, or you could do -0.5. I'll make that a little bigger for you guys. Okay, and where does that point we just drew line up on the y-axis? 0, always. It always lines up with 0. So let's look at that and make sure you guys understand it. If this is my point, when I look at where it falls on the y-axis, it's right here. I didn't go up any, I didn't go down any. It's right here. It's at 0 for y. So we're going to put 0 for y. See how it's the same thing as we did over here? That y is always going to be 0. Okay, now let's look at our y-intercept. So I'm going to have you trace your finger or your marker, your pen, pencil, up and down on the y-axis, and let's figure out where's the line touching it.
Where -1
Yeah, right about here at -1. You guys see that? Awesome. So is this our x value or our y value?
The Y.
Y. It's our y value because it's touching the y-axis. So it's touching the y-axis at where? What's this number? -1. Good. So we're going to write -1 in the y spot of our coordinate right over here. -1. And what's our x value for -1? 0. If I go up to the x-axis and see where it lines up, I didn't go left or right. It's right here at 0. X is 0 right here. So we're going to put 0 for our x value there. Okay. I'm not going to put anything more than that on your guys' brains. We're going to just do a bunch of practice with that stuff.
I was ready to say, give me some more graph paper so we could do some more.
Yes, we're going to do a whole bunch. And I made y'all some graph paper today, or last night.
I'm still a little confused.
That's okay. I don't expect you guys to understand this perfectly just yet. So this is
I
double-sided.
got my eyeballs.
I know it, girl. I'm telling you, it's like learning another language. This is the toughest part, is learning something like this. So here is some graph paper I made for you. It's double-sided. And I'm going to put it up on the screen. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to practice drawing our x and y axes. So if you like to keep your notes organized, if you want to label this so that you know which day it goes to, I'm going to write day 27. You don't have to do that. I just am doing that for my records. Day 27 notes continued. Yeah. And I'm going to say that this is unit 4. Pre-Algebra. Okay. So I would like for you guys to start by, let's look at our just very first little box I made for you. Let's draw our y-axis. So use your ruler, make it nice and straight. I didn't use a ruler when I drew these boxes, obviously. A little wiggly. Well, good. I'm going to draw a line up and down. And we always put arrows at the ends of our lines. Do you guys know why we put arrows at the ends of our lines for our axes? You guys know why?
It knows which way you're going.
Maybe so we know which way we're going. Any other ideas?
They both going and on, beginning and the end.
Yes, yes, Jenny, you got it. So the arrows tell us that this graph never ends. It is an infinite graph. The arrows tell us that it goes on forever and ever and ever in every direction. So whenever we draw a line, we put arrows on the end to show that that line does not end, ever. It's something that I can't even comprehend in my brain, but it's infinite, infinite. All right, so we've got a y-axis. Before we move on to the x, let's go ahead and label that. I'm going to put a y on top. You always should label your axes. Always, always, always. Because it doesn't matter how good you are at math. you're gonna mix it up one day. I do it too. So I always label. And then we're gonna just find somewhere that looks good, and I'm gonna draw a line for my x-axis. It's not perfect, but you know, whatever. And we put arrows on the ends. And then we're gonna label this with an X. And again, you guys can do it all in black and white if you want, or whatever colors you like, but from this day forward and to the end of time, I will always make my X's red and my Y's blue, just so there's some consistency.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Stop falling off.
Alright, so once you've got your X and your Y axis drawn, let's go ahead and draw some tick marks, just like we would whenever we were doing our inequalities. We're just labeling our lines. So I'm going to space them according to the grid on this paper. Just like this. And a lot of times I won't label the numbers just because I feel like it can make your graph look a little congested and crowded. But if seeing the numbers on there helps you, by all means, you can label your numbers too. Okay. I'm going to start by giving you a couple of points. Coordinates. Points or coordinates, they can be called the same thing. I'm going to draw a point right here. And I want you guys to tell me, how could I label this coordinate? What numbers would I put in for my X value and for my Y value? Yeah, okay, so let's look. I start at 0 and I go over on the x-axis first. 1, 2, it lines up with 2, so 2 is my x value. And then same thing, just like you said, Lisa, we'll start at 0, and instead of going left to right, this time we go up and down because we're looking at our y value. So we go up 1, 2, we're at positive 2 for y. And so we put that in, just like that. Any questions about how to find the numbers? Okay, all right, good deal. Let's put another one on there. Let me think about where I want it to be. I don't know. Let's do it over here. Okay. Now I want you to name this coordinate. First, what's my x value? Let's count. -1, -2, -3, -4. Yeah, that's all right. -4 is our first value. That's for x. Now, what's our y value going to be? If we start at 0, am I counting up or down? Down. So am I going to have a positive or a negative number? Negative. Good. So how many down am I going? -1, -2. Just -2. Just -2. That's where it lines up. And you know what? I'm thinking about this. I think it might be easier for us to work the opposite direction. How about I give you coordinates and you guys plot them? It might be tough to see where the dot is from your seat. So our answer for this is going to be -1, 2. -2 for y. Okay. Do you guys all understand where we got those numbers? Okay, good deal. Let's go ahead and draw a line now. So make sure it's lined up really nicely. Make it as exact as you can. Okay, and your line should look something like this. So now that we've got our line, let's do what we were doing before. I'm going to label my x-intercept and my y-intercept. And I'm going to put some coordinates, some empty parentheses that I can fill in with my numbers. So whenever I label a coordinate, which value comes first, x or y?
X.
X, good. And then that means y comes second. So let's first find our x-intercept. Is that going to be where my line touches the x-axis or the y-axis? For my x-intercept. The x-axis, good, good. So it's exactly what it sounds like. The x-intercept is where the line is touching, or if you've ever heard that word intercept, there's probably a better definition for it, but I always think of like a sports term, like when you intercept like a ball, you know, you catch the football, you're coming in contact with the football, you know. So this is kind of where the line, maybe even think of the coordinate right here as like the football, and the line is showing where the ball is being thrown, and boom, the x-axis, this is where it's touching it, right there. -1, good. So our x value for our x-intercept, I'm going to label it, is -1. What's our y value for the x-intercept, the second number in the coordinate? Where does it line up with the y-axis? 0. It's always 0. When we're finding intercepts, once we find the first number, the next one's always 0. 0. Okay, now let's look at our y-intercept. We want to look at where does this line touch the y-axis. It's not going to be a whole number again. It's going to be something in between. Yes, thank you, Jenny. So it's a little above 0, but a tiny bit below 1. So that's probably about 2/3. 2/3, we happy with that? And do we put that in the x value spot or the y value spot? Y value, good. So I'm going to put 2/3. And whenever we're just doing it visually, these are estimates, so I'm not going to be a stickler. Yes, I'm not going to be super strict on whether you put 2/3 or 1/2, or even if maybe your scale wasn't perfect and you got 1, that's fine. As long as what you wrote for your number makes sense with your picture. It's your picture that I'm worried about versus your numbers. I'm not going to be super strict about that. Okay, and then what's our x value for the y-intercept? 0. Very good. 0. Awesome. Let's do another one. Let's do another one. Yes, please.
How did you come up with that to 2/3? How do I get that in my mind?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so here.
Like that.
Let me show you. So, I'm going to take this little section here and kind of blow it up bigger. So I was looking at the y-axis, and here is 0, here is 1. So I'm going to make that section larger. I'm going to say, there's my arrow, and then there's that. Here's 1. Okay, that's like a zoomed in of this. And my point was right about here, right? I just thought, okay, well, if I, in my brain, split up this little section into 3 parts like that, I thought, okay, here would be 1/3, here would be 2/3. So it was just kind of a mental picture, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, it'd be like cooking my cups.
Yeah.
And then 3/4 and blah, blah, blah.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
So like if I'm looking on a line again and I'm looking about here, I know this is about halfway in between those. If I was here, I know that'd be about 3/4 of the way in between, because I'd be at 1, 2, 3 right there. So I could have even said 3/4, but I don't know. It just looked more like 2/3 to me.
I did it in my head.
Yeah, yeah. Does that make sense though?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good, good, good. All right, let's do another. So practice drawing your x-axis and your y-axis again. Let's do that. And this time, let's maybe make our tick marks a little further apart. I might do every other so that it's a little easier to see what's going on. Sometimes when things are too close together, it makes it a little tricky. Okay, and I'm going to label my x-axis and my y-axis. We always need to label our axes. And let's say I'm going to put every 2 a tick mark. So this will be 1, this will be 2. You guys see what I'm doing here? I'm just making it a lot more zoomed in. -1, -2, -1, -2, 1, 2. Okay. You guys see what I did there? You guys okay with the different scale?
Skip the block.
Yes, I'm going every other. So I'm going to make 1 tick mark is actually 2 spaces away from each other. So I'm kind of just zooming in on it. And this way we can be a little more accurate with our intercepts. We'll have a little more space to see the difference. Okay. First, let's do this point. And let's do this point. And then we're going to label these with their names or with their coordinate. Okay, so let's look at the coordinate or the point that I drew on the top. What would my x value be? 2. Good, 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 good. And what would my y value be?
-2.
Oh, not for this bottom one, for the top one.
Oh, 2.
Also 2. I accidentally did the same one as the last time. Oh well. Whoops. Okay, good. So we've got 2, 2 for this coordinate. Now let's look at the bottom coordinate. Where does it line up with the x-axis? -1. Perfect. So that's our x value. And where does it line up with the y-axis? -2. Good job. Okay, so we've named our coordinates. Now let's draw our line. And then we can find our intercepts. Oh, I messed up. My ruler slipped. There we go. Okay. Now we can be a little more accurate with our intercepts since our points are a little more spaced out. So let's talk about our x-intercept and our y-intercept. Okay, does everybody have their line drawn, or do we need a little more time? All right, you guys ready?
Yep.
All right, where does my line touch the x-axis?
Close to negative one, or positive.
So here's my x-axis. Where does it touch? It's almost exactly at 1/2, right there. Perfect. So for my x value of my x-intercept, I'm going to write 1/2. And what's my y value for that? Where does it line up with the y-axis? 0. Good. All right. Let's find out where it touches the y-axis now. Where's the y-intercept? Where is it touching? Where is it touching? Right there. Okay, so
But it's more
we've got a negative number here for our y value. We'll count down. We're at like negative 1/2, negative probably 3/4. You guys agree with that? About negative 3/4. So is that our x value or our y value?
That is the y.
Y value. Great. So we're going to put negative 3/4. And what's our x value for that? 0. Y'all got it. Y'all got it. Okay. All right, guys. We've got about 3 minutes left, and I really would have loved for us to, I had a whole exit ticket planned for you guys, but I don't feel comfortable making you guys do this on your own yet. I mean, you're welcome to attempt it, but I'm going to give this to you Monday instead. I think that today was a great little introduction to this, and we will do more work with it on Monday. How's that sound?
Thank you.
Of course.
My eyes are still going.
I get it, girl. All right, guys, that's going to be all for today. We'll learn more on Monday. Don't let your brains go crazy. I don't want you to even think about this over the weekend. It's just pretend it didn't even happen.
Oh, I did.
All right.